As you're shown, and today I'll be going through a program that uses a class to create an array, then assign some values to that array, then prints out all of the values from the array, and then tries to set a value to a specific element. So first thing I want to do is I want to run the program to see how it executes. So boom. So we have some stars with some 9 underneath, and then we have an invalid subscript. So I'm gonna go ahead and explain why all of this is happening. So the first thing I want to start with is my integer class, because that's the first thing we're going to create is the an object from the class. So let's go ahead and go through this. So here we have class called integer list. It starts right here. Then we have declare some private variables and a function prototype. So the first variable we have is a pointer variable that points to int data type. Then we have a num elements that is a data type of int. Then we have a function prototype that returns a boolean, so true or false, and it's a const. So it's not going to change the value at all. It's going to stay constant. Then we have some public member functions. We have the constructor, takes a parameter to an int. Then we have a destructor. Then we have some more function prototypes, set element, and get element. So I'm gonna go ahead and move to my integer list.cpp. I think I skipped over it. So in this program we have 3 files: the lesson.cpp, which acts like the main, the integer list.cpp, which have all the functions for the class, and the integer list.h, a header file that declares the class or defines the class. I think, yeah. So the first function I want to go through is the isValid function. So I'm going to go ahead into integer list.cpp, and let's see all the pound includes that we're using. So we're using IO stream for input and output operations. So C in and cout right here. Well, most is in, no C in, but cout. Then we have ctc.lib, and this is for memory allocation. And then we have the header file. We're including the header file so we can access the class, or we can link the member functions to the class. So now we'll go ahead and the first thing we have is the constructor. And the constructor, it takes a parameter size, a data type int, a parameter called size of a data type of int, integer. And inside the constructor, we're creating an array dynamic. We're allocating to memory an array, and the size is whatever the argument when the function is called is. Then it set num elements to the size also, and then we have a for loop right here, which this for loops it goes to each element in the array, and it assigns 0. So so index, which I'm assuming stands for index, is set to 0, and then index is less than the size, and the size is the index less than the size. This is the condition for the loop, and then index plus plus the increment index. So inside the for loop, we have list, which is the array, and we have the brackets and the index inside. So index will be 0 first, and then it will assign 0 to that element or to that subscript, and then it will increment to 1 and do the same thing again until the whole array is filled with zeros. And then we have a destructor. when the program ends, it will just discharge the class and delete the allocated memory that we did up here, so we don't have any leakage. Then the isValid function. The isValid function returns a bool, and we have to use the integer list to let the compiler know that it's of the integer list class. Then the function name is valid. It has a parameter of an int data type, and it's a constant. So the boolean we create in the function, there's a variable called status, and it's of a boolean data type, so it's a true or false. Only true or false can be stored in this variable. Then we have an if statement, and the if statement basically validates the element, the parameter up here, and it checks if the element is less than 0 or if it's greater than the size, which is the num elements. And the reason why this is here is to ensure that the user doesn't try to access an element that does not exist. So a subscript will never be less than 0 because that's the starting number, and it will never be equal to the size of the elements or greater than it, because there's no elements for that. And then if this is true, then it will set the status to false, which means the value was a correct subscript, and then the function will proceed. Else it return true, and then the function just returns status, whether it's true or false. Excuse me. Then we have the set element function. Function return void. Then we have to use the integer list class, so the compiler knows, or so the program knows that it's of the we're defining a function of the class. Uses a parameter. Uses two int parameters, element and value. So the first thing it does, uses an if statement, and it's calling the isValid function, and it passes the parameter element. So basically what this does, and I'm going to go back up to the isValid function. Say element is 6. It goes ahead and it puts element 6 right here, and if 6 is less than 0, which is it's not, or if 6 is greater than or equal to num of elements, then the status will be set to false, else the status will be set to true. So whichever, it will be set to false in this case if num of elements is greater than 6. Right. So yeah. So in this function it will return true or false, and then the value will be whatever value the user wants to store in that particular element. So it uses the list array, and it has the brackets, and it passes the element to access whichever element it wants to store the value in. And that's all the function on it. If this is false, then it will print out an error and say invalid subscript, and then it will exit the function. Then we'll move on to the last function definition inside the integer list.cpp, and it returns this function returns an int, and it's of the integer list class named getElement. It's a parameter called element. It takes a parameter called element of an int data type, and it starts right here. Then inside this function, it uses an if statement again. It then calls the if element, not its if element, but it then calls the isValid function with an argument element, and if this is true, then it will return the value inside of this subscript. And then if it's false, then it will print out an invalid subscript, and then it will exit the function, exit the program. Now we can move on to our lesson 2.cpp, and this is basically a main. So the power includes that we have up here is IO stream for input and output operations. So cout, we're not using any scene in this program, and include, and then we got a class. It includes the class, the header file for the class, so we can create a object. Then function called main. The function starts right here. First thing we have is a constant called size, and it's 20. So the size is 20. Then right here we have the instance of the class called numbers. So this what is this? This declaration right here of the object, or definition of the object, it calls the constructor. And remember, in the constructor integral list, it dynamically allocates to memory an array with the size, so it will be 20. It will be an array of 20. Then it assigns 20 to num elements, and then it assigns 0 to all 20 elements. So from 0 to 19, from elements 0 to 19, the value will be 0. Then we have the destructor that deletes the memory. We already did that. I'm doing double work. Then move back out to our lesson 2 at CPP. We have two variables, val and int. Val and x of our int data type. Then we have a for loop. So this for loops, it loops through the whole array. So it assigns 0 to x, and then if x is less than the size, which is 20, it will go into this block and it will run the numbers that set element function, and the set element function takes two parameters, element and value. So the element will be x, which will start off with 0, and the value will be 9. So it checks if the element is valid. So 0 is valid because the function right here, where is valid function? Function right here checks if the element is less than 0. 0 is not less than 0. 0 is 0, so that is true. So this function will set the status to false, and then the value will be 9. So the set element will assign 9. The value will be 9 in this case. And then so 9. So this function basically runs through for each element in the array. So for all 20 elements, the 9 will be assigned. And this is why we saw 9 when we ran the function. Well, we set it. We didn't get it yet. We didn't use the get function, but they set all the elements to 9. Then it's printing out a star, and that is the star that we see right here. For each element, it prints for each time the loop iterates, it prints a star. Then we have a end line statement. Is just for a blank for readability in the code. Then we have another for loop that basically does the same thing. It loops through all of the array, but this time we're getting each element of the array. So we're using numbers that get element, and we can go back and check. It takes one parameter, which is the element, and then it checks if the element is valid, which it is, because x is 0 at this point at the start of the array, and x will be less than. It will stop when x is less than the size, which is 20, so it will be 19, so which is correct. It is valid. So then the value will equal to whatever x is. Right, so it'll print out, since we already stored 9 for each value, we print out 9 for the whole array. And this is what we see here. and a space. Then we have another line for readability. And then the program tries to use the set element function from the numbers instant, and it takes an element of 50 and tries to set 9 to that element. But this is incorrect, or this will not run in the program, and this is why we have this error right here, invalid subscript, because the size allocated to memory was 20. So a subscript of 50 does not exist. So this is why we have an invalid subscript, and it checks, and that basically shows that the isValid function is working, because 50 is not a valid element. So element will be 50 in this case. So if element is less than 0, 50 is not less than 0, but 50 is greater than the number of elements, which is 20 right now. So in order to fix this, all we could do is put 51, and the reason why I have to put 51 because the last element with an array of a size 51 is 50. If I were to put 50, the last element would be 49, and that still wouldn't work. So I'm gonna go ahead and prove that to you. So I have 51 right now, and it should work, and it should have 59s basically, or 51 nines and stars element, and there it run this time element 50 successfully set. But if I had 50, it was still run an error, right? So I'm gonna put this back to 20, and yeah, that's it.